Welcome to another episode of Final Cut Pro Help Live. My name is Jared Ewing, and we're going to be getting started in about 4 minutes. So make sure your microphone and your speakers and all that good stuff is working. We're testing it out right now for you. And if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in that chat if you're watching this live. If you are watching this on a replay, go ahead and skip ahead. That countdown will go down to 0. That's when we get started. It is that time. For the first time in 2020, Final Cut Pro Help Live is here. My name is Jared Ewing, and I'm going to teach you some things in this episode. We're going to look at one topic, and then we'll end it with the Final Cut Gym like we've done in other episodes. But I got a question on Instagram that I did want to address because it's kind of a fun one, and it's how I got started with video editing and really learning Final Cut Pro. And the question was simply, how can you create a stop motion animation using Final Cut Pro? So the first thing is kind of understanding what stop motion animation is, and it's simply taking pictures of an object or a scene and then moving everything in that scene a little bit forward, taking another picture, and then repeating that step over and over and over again. And then in the editing process, which you're going to see in this video, you put all those pictures together, and it looks like an animation or video, kind of like a flip book if you've ever done that, and flip through a bunch of pages to create some drawing or something that's moving. So how do you actually go about creating that? Well, that's what I'm going to show you here, and this is something you can do just about with any object. I'm using an iPhone to record the video. You can use your computer's camera if you position it correctly, but any camera, this is something that does not need to be an expensive production. You can do this with anything. It's a great way to get started, especially if you don't have the resources to set up a production and record something on your own. So to do this, the first step, we're going to import a video clip into Final Cut Pro, and I'm going to show you what this clip is, and you'll kind of hopefully get an idea of what you want to create. So all I did was put a piece of paper on my desk in front of me, and I took a quarter, just a coin, and I moved it across the page periodically. Now after I moved it, you'll notice I moved my finger away from the page, and then for a second, and then I move the quarter again, move my finger away, and I repeat that step over and over again, and we're going to make it so it looks like that quarter is moving or animating across the page, and that's through a process called stop motion animation. So all I did was record one clip. We're going to import that in. I'm going to import the selected into my existing event here. This is just going to go into the stock media event that I've created. If you don't have an event, you can create one as well. Just name it whatever you want. And then what we're going to do is create a new project. I'm going to do that using the Command N shortcut, and I'm going to call this our quarter. Always name your projects too. I see many clips and pictures, especially if you have a question, you send it to me, and I notice in the middle of your Final Cut interface, it's just called Untitled Project. It's just a bad habit. You want to get into naming your projects, keeping organized, makes everything so much easier. So in this example, it's one video clip that has all of the various still frames that I want to use to create this animation. Now you may use your phone or your device to take still pictures of each frame that you're going to merge together, and that's totally fine too. And you can import those into Final Cut as well. But in this case, I have a video clip, so I'm just going to click on that clip and drag it down onto my timeline. And I'm going to use the Shift-Z shortcut, Z like zebra, to zoom into that timeline so that we take advantage of the real estate here on the screen. Now, I'm going to do this first segment where I move the quarter across the page in very big gaps. So there's kind of going to be more space in between each movement here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the letter B on the keyboard for blade. That activates my razor blade tool. And I'm going to cut it right here. When I have a blank page, I'm going to press the A key on the keyboard for the arrow tool, and I'll delete that first segment. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to delete the last segment here, which is right about here. A, delete. And then I'll do Shift-Z again to fit that whole clip onto the screen. And if you're a little confused, if this is hard to follow because I'm going kind of quick, it's okay. This is something that takes practice to get used to, and hopefully you'll see this after I finish this first segment, and then we'll repeat it again for a much longer segment. I'm going to take the volume all the way down because I don't need that volume. And now what I'm going to do is cut each frame here. So I'm going to have one frame up at the top that is blank. I'm going to hit the B key to grab my razor blade, and I'm going to click on the clip to cut it. I'm going to move. You'll notice my hand comes onto the screen to move the quarter into place. And once my hand comes off of the screen, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to move a little bit further down, cut it again, and now we'll continue until it's moved over to the next spot right here. Cut it, move down just a little bit, just so we have a short segment. Then we move till we get to the next spot. Move off, cut it, move down a little bit, cut it, go down to the next spot. There's the next position, cut it, and then one more time when it's off the screen, then we have our blank screen. Then I'm going to hit the A key to activate the arrow tool. also known as the select tool. And what we're going to do here is delete all of these segments that we don't need. So I'm going to hold down the command key and click on each of these large segments here, because that's when we were repositioning, in this case, the quarter. And for your stop motion, it might be any object. If you have like Lego characters or another type of toy that you're trying to animate, that's what you would be moving in all of these segments. We don't need that movement, so we're going to hit the delete key to remove those segments. And then notice we have all these frames here. I'm going to use Shift Z just to zoom into it so we can see our project. Now, this whole project is only 1 second long. It's really quick. So I'm going to play it, and I'll play a couple times here, but we'll see that quarter moving across the screen. All right, so let me play it again. And notice how it just kind of animates across the screen. It's a very rough, quick animation. There's not that many frames in this animation. It kind of stops and chugs as it goes across the screen there. So if I want it to go a little bit faster, I could shorten each one of these segments here. And as you click and drag on the edge of a segment to shorten it, there's a little pop-up window that comes up that shows you the length of the clip. That's what that left number is. In this case, it's 3 frames. So 0 seconds and 3 frames. And then the negative 0002, that negative number is just how much I'm changing it. So in stop motion animation, you'll find it can be very helpful to have all of these clips be the same length. So if I look at my first clip, I can see it's 2 frames long. The second one is 2 frames long. The third one here, though, is 3 frames long. So I'm going to shorten that and make it 2 frames. And I'm going to do the same thing with all of these other clips here, make them 2 frames long. That way it stays at the same length for each frame. And if I play it, again, this is going to be really quick. Split second there. Might be able to see that quarter just kind of scooting across the page there. Now in that, even in this quick spot, you might have noticed right here in this clip, what is this, the 5th frame over, my finger actually starts coming into the frame in the lower right corner here. So I don't like that. So I'm going to hit the T key to activate the trim tool, and I'm going to click and drag on this frame here just so I move my finger out. Notice on the right side of the viewer where you can see my finger right now in that lower right corner, I'm just going to drag my mouse to the right a little bit till that finger is gone. And now if I play this, we shouldn't see my finger come into the frame there. All right, and that's a little stop motion animation that we've created using Final Cut Pro. And we created this from a video clip and took still frames out of it. Now we're going to do this again with a longer portion of that video that has more frames, and you'll see how the animation is going to be much smoother when you take more pictures. So have less of a movement, in this case of the quarter, whatever your object is, the more of these pictures and these still frames that you can get, the smoother that animation is gonna look. So in this case, I'm gonna hit Command A and hit the delete key to remove this and go back up to my project here, and I'll bring that whole clip back down. Do Shift Z again to fit it in the timeline. And then notice here on the second portion of this clip, I have the quarter rolling across the bottom of the screen here. And we're going to use that as our next thing, just to kind of animate that rolling across. And you might see how I have more frames that I used in that case. So again, same process that we did a second ago. I'm going to hit the B key to activate the razor blade. Click on my page, hit the A key to activate the arrow. Click on this first portion. I don't need this anymore, so I can hit delete to get rid of that. I'm going to look at the end. I like to trim the beginning and the end just to get that going. And then again, Shift Z, fit that whole clip onto the timeline. Keep doing that. Keep adjusting the interface. It'll help you out. Take advantage of your screen and the resources that you have. So now we're going to hit the razor blade tool. We're going to go and cut this one a whole bunch of times. So I want to cut it at the beginning here, so I get a little segment for just a kind of a white page there. And then right here we have the quarter on the screen just a little bit. I move it, click, click, move it again, click, click. Stop motion animation is definitely a lesson in patience. But I strongly recommend trying this out. It is a lesson in patience, but it's also something that this kind of technical work that you're doing, really lets you get used to how the app, in this case Final Cut Pro, works. But it also lets you look at a lot of details that you may not have noticed before just in normal filmmaking and normal capturing of video and content. All right, so I've made all those cuts. I'm going to hit the A key, going to go back to my arrow, and now I want to delete all these segments. So again, I'm going to hold the Command key, and I can click on every other segment to select them all. And then with them all selected, I'm going to hit the delete key on the keyboard. And because Final Cut Pro has a magnetic timeline, it removes all those segments and automatically connects all of those clips together. I can do Shift Z again to fit all of those clips onto the timeline. And there we see our little project. I can already tell just visually these clips are not all the same length. So if I click on a clip here in the middle, this yellow time code that's here, I can see this is 7 frames. If I click on the next one, it's 9 frames. This one's a little bit shorter, 7 frames. This one's even shorter, 6 frames. So they're not all the same frame rate. So I could go through one by one and adjust these. But something that's kind of cool is you can adjust all the clips at once as well. So if you do Command A to select all of those clips, you can go up here, I believe under the trim menu. No, didn't have it. Let's go to the edit menu. And this is one of my favorite kind of options and things in here is these options to copy and paste adjustments and attributes between different clips. It's really cool. So you can keep everything the same length. We will do that actually in just a second. I'm kind of jumping ahead here with what we want to do. But in this case, we want to adjust the length and the duration of each of these clips. So under the Modify menu, there's an option here that says Change Duration. You can use the shortcut Control D. And this is really great for what I'm doing right here with these video clips that are all different lengths. But if you have a whole bunch of still pictures because you did it that way, you can put them all into Final Cut. Their default duration might be set to 4 seconds or something else, but you might have hundreds of frames for the stop motion. Select them all, hit Change Duration, and then in the middle here, we get our duration, and you can adjust it right there, which is pretty cool. So in this case, I'm just going to hit 2 and hit Return, and what that does is sets it to 2 frames. So now each one of these, if I click on any of these clips, you can see the yellow time code here, which represents the selected clips duration. All of them are now 2 frames. And then I can hit Shift Z to fit in frame. And we'll go ahead and play this project and see that quarter kind of rolling across the bottom of the screen there. So I used a quarter because it's extremely simple. It's just a circle on the screen. Your stop motion might use a character that has a lot more complex animation and movement to it, but in this case, just very simple quarter rolling across the screen. If I play this again and I decided maybe it's a little quick, I can do the Command A to select all of them, the Control D to get back into my duration, and then I'm going to hit 3, Return. This makes each one of those frames or stills that there is now 3 frames long instead of 2. If I play it, you can see the quarter a little bit slower going across the screen. So you want to play with that. How long each of those should be, that's kind of personal preference. And as you're making changes to your clips there, that's how you can kind of get used to it and find out what works for you. Now, the next step is if you're making more of a short or a longer project. In this case, I just have this 1 quarter rolling across the screen. But if you're mixing this in with a bunch of things, even though these are a bunch of different clips, they're actually all one shot. It's just, there's the quarter rolling across the screen, and then I might go to another shot where the quarter is rolling across a different terrain. Maybe it's on dirt or something else. Well, all of these still images here from that quarter are actually part of one clip. So you can combine all these into a compound clip and make it easier to work with in a full project. So Option G brings up this little menu at the top, and it's going to group these clips, these selected stills, into a compound clip. So and just like I mentioned earlier, naming your projects is important. Naming your compound clips, if you're going to do this, is also really important because it will keep you organized. So in this case, this is the quarter rolling clip. So I'm just going to call it quarter rolling clip. If you have a much longer project, get a better naming convention so that you understand what all of your shots are, because now you'll see in my browser I have that compound clip. That's what this little icon means, and I can put that into other projects. So that's how you can kind of bring in still images, even if it's from a video clip, edit them, and change their durations, combine them into a compound clip to create a little stop motion animation. A couple other features that Final Cut has, you can see probably not too much in this clips, but you'll see it probably in your own, especially if you're making much longer clips, that the lighting is very important. The lighting affects the visuals of all of these frames, and they can be different frame to frame. So if you color correct a shot here, say I go to one of these middle clips with the quarter, you might go into your color inspector and make adjustments to it, or you can use the little magic wand here, and there's options to balance the color, and it'll try to adjust it for you. Notice here it made the kind of the whites a lot brighter, the quarter is a little shinier with that correction in there. I'll undo the balance color this was before, kind of a little like orange, and the quarter is not as silver, but if I hit balance color, it adjusts it, now it looks great, right? But if I play this back, you'll notice kind of that one frame looks pretty bad. It kind of like jumps out. Might be hard to see on the stream here, but you can see how like the paper is much whiter in the color corrected version, but not the rest of them. So this might happen just without you doing anything, just in the way it was captured. So if you go through and color correct your clips, you can then select the one that you color corrected, do Command C to copy that clip, and then select all the rest of the clips, which I'm just in the empty space here. I'm just clicking and dragging to select them all. Do the same thing on the other side while holding the Command key. And with them all selected, you can go up to the Edit menu, and there's an option then that I was mentioning earlier where we have this option to paste either the effects or the attributes. In this case, you want to do paste attributes because you'll get a little checklist, and you can choose just to paste that balance color onto all of those clips. I'll hit paste, and what Final Cut's going to do is take that balance color that we did on the one clip and puts it on all of the rest of them. You'll see there's a little dotted line at the top of our timeline here because Final Cut does need to render these clips so that it'll play back nice and smoothly. But even without rendering, if I go back and play this, you can see how the paper is much whiter on all of those clips as it moves across. Quarter arguably is a little bit shinier going through. So that's a way to color correct all of your clips on your little project there. So that's what I had for you as far as this little segment of how can you create a stop motion animation using Final Cut Pro, and kind of a couple of my tips that are on there. Just to summarize, you got to import your video, import your still images if you're doing it that way, bring them into your project. If it's the video, you're going to cut out using the blade tool. Just cut out all the segments that are you readjusting things that you don't need. Change the duration of all of your still images or your video clips in this case to be the same. Usually 2 or 3 frames is going to be pretty nice for your stop motion. If you spend a lot of time, you might even bring it down to 1 frame. That's going to be your smoothest view, but your motions and your changes have to be very, very, very subtle. But if this is just kind of a rough project in this case for learning Final Cut, doesn't matter too much. And then once you have them all cut up, group your clips into compound clips using that option W shortcut. That way your compound clips can be easier to manage and move around into a project. As an example, just to kind of go back here, let me go to one of my other projects that we were using in an earlier video, an earlier demo. You can treat this compound clip, even though it's all of those various still images, basically you can treat them as if it's a normal clip. So I think, here in this app Final Cut Pro project, if I go down, where's my quarter here? I just click and drag this into the project. We'll just put it after this page here. And we don't need this audio, but if we play this, you'll see how we have this little blurred thing. Here's our quarter coming across. It's got a render, but then after the quarter goes to the other donut. Let me get rid of this gap clip. Let's do Shift Z to fit. But notice how this is a compound clip, the quarters, that we just dropped into another project. So you can reuse that in as many projects as you want. That's kind of the benefits and the great things about compound clips and merging that stuff together there. Now, that is what I had for you for that. If you do have additional questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat below or commenting on this video. You can also send a direct message to @FinalCutProHelp on Instagram. That's usually where I'm the quickest to reply and to respond. But before we go away for today, I did want to give us one more segment here, which is the Final Cut Gym. So we've done this a couple times, and the Final Cut Gym is a spot where you can go to work out your Final Cut muscles there. And one of the questions that I got was just, can you go over all of the sharing options inside of Final Cut Pro? Well, that is really difficult to do. There are so many options that you can use for sharing from Final Cut Pro to other places, but this is the Final Cut Gym and the workout that you can do to practice this and really get used to sharing stuff from Final Cut, because that's how you get your final product out to everyone else. So here's what we're going to do. I have this quarter project that I created here. I'm going to go up to the top right corner. You have a couple buttons in Final Cut. We're going to use the left one here to hide the browser. We don't need the browser anymore. And then we don't need the inspector either. So I'm going to hide the inspector. And then all the way in the top right corner is the share button. And if you click the share button, you get a list of share destinations. Your destinations may vary. This is not the default group. It's pretty close to it, but it's I've added a couple over the period of time using this account. But these destinations are how you can take your project and send it out to wherever you want to go, wherever you're trying to save it. So I do recommend going through the default destinations you see here on the list. But once you're done with that, you can go down to add destinations and add more, and we'll look at that in just a second. But here's the deal. You have different ways to share. I find the most common place that I personally share to is master file, and that's usually set to the default as well. So let's go ahead and start with master file. I'm going to click on share. I'm going to hit master file, and then this lets us see I have a pretty standard share window that comes up. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but you can go through and click on just about anything in here. You can even kind of scrub across this little preview window to see what's there. Down at the bottom, you get some information about what file is actually going to be created. On the right side here, you can actually hover over this little computer icon to see all of the compatible Apple devices this will work on, which is great if you're sharing out to maybe an iPhone, or you want to share it to someone else that you know that has an older device. Maybe they have an original iPad. You want to make sure it's compatible. You can use just hover your mouse there to see that. And you get an estimated size. This is just estimated. It is going to change depending on how you're compressing it and setting it out, which is determined in the settings. So this was all in the info tab. The next tab over is the settings tab, where we see the name of the share destination, what's actually being sent out, and you can customize things in here. I have covered a lot of this stuff in different videos, and you can go in here and kind of watch those other videos to get an idea of all of these segments on here. But a big one here is the video codec. Understand these codecs. That's huge. Knowing what these are and things like H.264 is a great way for compressing things for the web and sharing, whereas these other ones can be a little trickier, which one you choose and which flavor you go through. If you have specific scenarios you're working with, send me a direct message. I'd be happy to talk about that and assist with that. So the master file, that's kind of for creating like it says, like a master file. It's the least amount of compression. It's a great way to share it and send things out the way you just have a project. That's what I use for archiving and sending out. But it can be a very poor way to send it to someone else. Like if you're trying to publish this to YouTube or another streaming site, sending out a master file may not be the best for it. And that's why you have these other destinations to be able to share directly to those types of websites and sharing and all of that. I see in the chat there, am I really live or is this a video which is live. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to say there. This is live. We're live right now. If you're watching this on a replay, you know it, and and then you can rewind all that good stuff. So yeah, that's the YouTube one. Let me see the other comment that's here. Can you unlink or disable your photos in photo and audio sidebar? The top left middle icon is I don't want my photo library linked to Final Cut Pro. I would far rather import photos from the Finder. So, James, that's a great question. I'm going to go through the rest of the share destinations here in a second. But what James is asking here is in your top left corner, you have, when you have the browser up, you have your, in this case, the library sidebar. And the next one over is your photo and audio sidebar. So, James, what I believe you're asking is, can you unlink or disable like your photos from showing up in here? You'll notice how I don't have a photo library on this machine right now, so it's not showing up, but I do have like music and sound effects in each of those. This sidebar and this content that's here, it's not actually in Final Cut Pro. So there's nothing you really have to worry about here, and there's not really a need to like disable or unlink it from being in there. And the second part of it, you don't want to do it from the photo library. You'd rather import photos from the Finder. You could 100% do that. There's nothing wrong with importing directly from the Finder. If I click on the Photos app here, I haven't done anything with it in this account, so let's just open it up here. I'm going to take a screenshot and import that in just as a quick way to show you, just to get some content into Final Cut, or sorry, into Photos. There we have a photo in, and then we'll go back to the photo library. So in the photo library, might have to close and reopen because it's not here just yet. Yeah, we don't have our photo library coming up. That's okay. Let's just quit and relaunch Final Cut when in doubt. And I'll show you this one photo that I imported, that screenshot should show up there. That's why I wasn't streaming out earlier. All right. So, yeah, again, just to kind of recap here, James, you're wondering, can you disable the photos from being here in the sidebar? So you'll notice now how I see photos, Logic, GarageBand, music, and sound effects in my column there. The photos and the music is being linked to your music app or your photos app. However, that content is not in Final Cut. It's not already imported or anything like that. You're just using this as a viewer or a way to see your library without having to actually open the app and use the Finder. So if I go up to Photos, we should see that one screenshot that I put in here. This screenshot is still in Photos. It has nothing to do with Final Cut. However, if I drag that screenshot down onto my project or use like E to append it to the end, then you are bringing it into your Final Cut project and copying it over there. There we go. That's the picture. So now that it's there, if I go back to my library, we can see the screenshots being copied or imported in. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity on that part of it. If you really want to like disable or hide this photo library here, you'd have to unlink it from the Photos app, and that's a lot of work. There's not a need to do that in my opinion. If you have another one, you're welcome to send me an email or a direct message, and we can kind of work through that if there's another reason for that. But all the stuff that you see in the sidebar under Photos and Music, none of it is in your Final Cut libraries. It's not being copied or anything like that. It's not taking up twice as much space on your computer until you import that into either a project or into your library. All right, so now we've taken a break from our Final Cut gym. We've kind of relaxed the share muscles. We're going to go back into it. So let's do another rep on sharing. We'll go up to the share menu and choose another destination. So if you're not used to these destinations, if you don't know why they're here, just go in and click on them and find out. So next one on the list up here is DVD. Very similar to Blu-ray as well. Notice we have an info tab and a settings tab. This one's even simpler than the last one. info, we can go on any of these and click on it. This is your primary name, so this might be our DVD, so we can add DVD to the name. You can go in and put in a description, put in a creator if you want. It's going to pull in your username by default, add tags, all that good stuff. Notice we're sharing to a DVD, so the resolution is much lower at the bottom there. It is stereo. It's about 2 seconds long. This is quite a long quality project. And it's going to create these two files because it is a DVD. And if we go up to the settings menu, I can see these settings are much different than what we saw in the last segment here, because we are creating a DVD in this case. So it's letting us know it's going to go to the hard drive. If you have a built-in or connected DVD player, you'll see that as well, and you get all the options for it. All of these things are detailed online. If you have any questions about those, just do a little web search and you should find those. You can always direct message me as well for those. So a couple other quick things about the share menu here. We looked at DVD, Blu-ray is very similar. You're creating a disc. Master file we saw, we're just creating that really high-res version or kind of a, this is the total project that's ready to go. We then have these three options for sharing to Apple devices, either at 720, which is the smallest or the lowest resolution version listed here, a little bit higher at HD, we have 1080, and then 4K. If your project is not 4K, there's not really a benefit for most people to share to 4K. It's not like you're going to all of a sudden improve the quality of your video there, but you do get those options. All very similar. We'll choose the 4K option here. You'll notice lower left corner, we get the resolution 4K that we're sending out, the duration, all that good stuff. It then shows us the file extension. And if I hover over the little computer, unlike what we saw earlier, you can see these are compatible with a lot of other devices. But maybe you have someone that's using an iPhone 5S or older. Those devices are not compatible with this format here, so you want to keep that in mind. That's what this little checklist is for. Pretty useful little thing there. So that's our info settings. Again, very similar to what we saw before. When I did get this question, under video codec, there's this option here. It says H.264 faster encode. The other option here, H.264 better quality. So faster encode means the export or the share that you're going to do here will finish quicker. However, I find that the difference in time usually is not that crucial. If you are in a time crunch, yes, go faster encode. However, most people want a better quality video, so change this to better quality. And when you go to export and hit next, it'll ask you where you want to save that file. You can choose where you want to save it, hit save, and it'll actually export and share that. But that'll give you a slightly better quality video because you're using a better codec. But that's why we chose for sharing to Apple devices. It has it all ready to go. Instead of it being mastering, which is your master file, it's sending it right out to our Apple devices. So that's kind of another rep of choosing one of those share destinations and going from there. So the next step here under the share one, we see Facebook, YouTube, and Vimeo. So sharing out to social media and web-based sharing platforms like YouTube. You're watching me on YouTube right now probably. Vimeo, Facebook, all those options. So these are set up very similar. If let's choose YouTube. If we go and share to YouTube, notice we have the info, just like all the rest of them. If we go to settings, we get a couple settings here, and these are specific to the platform you chose. In this case, YouTube has specific categories that your videos can be categorized under, so you got to choose one of those, and this is something unique to YouTube, so you see those lists. If we chose Facebook or Vimeo or any of the other options, you'd see the equivalent on their platform. One tip I have about sharing to YouTube, I do usually recommend keeping the privacy at private. Share it as private. Check it, go onto YouTube, watch it, make sure it is actually shared the way you want it to, and then change it to either public or unlisted from there. You can certainly do what you want and share it as public, but it's always great practice to check your work, verify every step before kind of going and just sending it out to the world and finding there's a mistake. And then just like the other one, compression, I very rarely recommend faster encode, just change that to better quality. It might take a little bit longer, but it's worth it there. And then if your project can support it, change that resolution. You can go all the way up to 4K right now with YouTube. So if your project allows it and you have it, you can go up that far. If your project's not 4K, it won't let you go up that far. So it'll just go as high as it can to benefit there. You also see the sign in button here. This allows you to go in and sign into your account. It'll connect to YouTube, go through all those steps there. I know recently some people have been having issues signing into their account and sharing directly to the site. And yeah, that's annoying. That's a problem that if you're having it, you're not the only one. And that's where you have to just share this project out to a folder. You're not going to be able to sign in directly to it. So you're going to have to share it, export it as a file first, and then upload it directly on the website without going through the YouTube site. So that's something where we'd switch back over. Instead of sharing it to YouTube, we'd choose to share it to our master file, for example. We can share it as one of those H.264 ones and upload it that way. All right, James, you responded there. Let's see. That's fine. Thank you for the explanation. Just all my pictures showed up. Yeah, Jamie, that's the kind of the nature of this, because Final Cut's designed for everyone from your kind of beginner level editor that just moved up maybe from iMovie, and you're doing more personal projects, all the way up to professionals that are working on TV shows, films, movies. It's designed to support everyone, which unfortunately you get kind of these weird things that you would never use maybe in a professional environment. You're not going to use the Photos app to organize your pictures. You might use something a little bit higher end than that, and that's where you kind of get these weird things where, like, you go into Photos and you're working on your business videos and editing in Final Cut, and then all of a sudden your personal photo library shows up in Photos. It can be kind of annoying there, but that's just kind of part of the nature of Final Cut being designed for everyone there. At least that's what I've run into with that part of it. Cool. So then going back to our share setting here, we saw the social things here. Then you might see here I have save current frame. I have an HD 1080p option from Compressor, and those I added in by hitting this Add Destination button. So once you get familiar with the default locations that are under that share menu, your muscles for the sharing are getting a little bit bigger, so it's time to go into Final Cut Preferences here under the Destinations tab and see all the other options you have that you can add in here. So there's really not that many, but this small list that's here allows you to do so much, because we saw how you can share to DVD and Blu-ray. There's also an email option here. If you're emailing video at this point, it's usually not a thing. Most people at this point are going to be sharing either YouTube video or preferring to Facebook, but this will give you a small version. Now, if we wanted to do that, we can just click and drag this over to the left column here to put it in as a share destination. You can also double click on these share destinations to rename them. But on the right side, you'll get all the options for that destination. So if you do have this as an option here, you might be sharing out to emails. So let's share this project email. If I go up to share, notice I now have my email destination. I can hit email, get all the options in there. I go to settings, I look at them. Great. It's really small resolution. It's 235K. It's barely anything in size. But I noticed this compression, faster encode. Like I've said earlier, I don't like that. I usually change this to better quality. You don't want to be doing that every single time, right? Because that's kind of a waste. So when you're in those destination preferences, go ahead and customize these destinations the way you want. So if you're always going to better quality, change it here in preferences, and then you won't have to adjust it every single time. If I go under YouTube, I'll change it to better quality. What else do we have? I think everything else should be good. Master file looks good. Apple devices, that was faster encode. We'll change that to better quality under each of these. And by changing it here in preferences, then you don't have to do it every single time you share, right? So save yourself the time. Time is money if you're an editor for hire. That's a great way to get out there. Now, if I know I'm never going to be sharing to Apple devices for 720, I can also go up here and hit the minus. Like, I'm not going to be emailing, so you can hit the minus to remove that destination. And that way you just keep this menu here a little bit cleaner. So cool. So that was DVD, Blu-ray, email. We saw YouTube, Vimeo, and Facebook. We know that's for sharing to the social sites. You also get an option here to save as a current frame, which I added to the sidebar here. I use this one very frequently. If there's a still image that you want to send out to someone, still frame from your project, just share it and you're good to go. The way that you would do that is go onto the frame you want to send, go up to the share button, and then hit save current frame. And just like every other destination here, we get those options. I can go under setting and choose the export format that I want to send out there. If you have any questions about those formats or you're doing it yourself, send me an email. It's totally fine. And then the last couple ones here, we had an image sequence, which is great for animation. So we were talking about the stop motion animation. An image sequence actually sends out every single frame of your video and puts it into a still image altogether. Export file, that's how we got that master file option. If you have compressor, these options here are not enough. Compressor allows you to do just about anything you'd want with exporting a file out. And then there's a live streaming option as well if you're working with a server or someone that wants to publish that. The last one on here is this one called Bundle. You can actually share it to multiple destinations at once. So we saw these Apple devices for 720, 1080, and 4K options. Maybe you want to create one of each of those videos all at once. You can do that by sharing all of them in a bundle. So if I drag this over to the side, here we get our bundle, and then we can add those to it. So I can move those into a bundle. In this case, I just have the 4K and 1080 options. So if I do a share, bundle, and you want to name the bundles to make it easier. But now you'll see at the bottom here, there's this little arrow that allows you to see each of those settings and what's going to be created and what's going to be sent out when you share those options. So that is our trip to the Final Cut Gym in this episode. You can definitely do that workout at any time when you have a project that you're nearing finish or even an individual clip. You can select that clip, go up to the share button, and export those out and try out those various options there. Each one of these destinations is going to give you a different type of file in the end. So it's a great way to practice it, try it out, see what you get. A lot of people ask me, well, what is it going to look like? How large is the file going to be? They ask me all kinds of things on here that you really just have to try it and see what you get. This estimated file size here, 149, how big is it actually going to be? You don't know. That's something you got to go through and practice it, get used to exporting these things, and you'll see how large those are. So that's why this was part of the Final Cut Gym, is because a lot of practice is actually really helpful for sharing out to those various destinations. So that's what I had for you in this episode of Final Cut Pro Help Live. Again, just to summarize, we looked at creating a stop motion animation with these various still frames on here, which if you're looking for footage and you want to practice something, this is a great way to do it. This clip with the quarter took like a minute and a half to record, brought it in, can edit, learning compound clips, the razor blade tool, arrow tools. We even use the trim tool to adjust and roll a clip. There's a lot of things that you can do with these stop motion projects that allow you to really discover features of Final Cut. That's pretty cool, and I recommend doing that. We then looked at, in the Final Cut Gym, those different share destinations and how to use those and work with those. You should not be afraid of those. Go in there, try it out, share it. It's not really something that you can break in there. It's one of those things you just got to practice to get used to those. And we also answered a couple questions there in the chat there, mostly about the photo and audio sidebar here. For working and seeing your photo library along with your music library. And I think the big takeaway with this is what you see here is not being copied into Final Cut. These are just like portals or kind of doorways into the libraries that they're accessing. So this just allows you to see your photo library or your music library without having to go into the app. So if you prefer it that way, it's totally fine. You just don't have to do anything here in the photo sidebar. You just ignore it and import the stuff directly into whatever event you're working on, and it'll make that copy. If you do drag in either a photo or a song or something else from this sidebar and these various libraries here, that's when they'll be copied. Those files will be copied into your library. So that's what we got for you. We'll be back next month when we got February coming up. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to either send an email to finalcutprohelp@me.com, or the best way to get a hold of me is through Instagram using @finalcutprohelp. Post a bunch of tips on there, so if you're not following, go over and do it now. You'll find some tips on there, and if you have an additional question that did not get answered, just send me a direct message on there, or using the email finalcutprohelp@me.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.